This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report coming to you with the second edition of the Global Research Feature Interview, a new weekly audio and video podcast from globalresearchtv.com in which we will be interviewing researchers, writers, and newsmakers from around the world. And this week we're honored to be joined by none other than Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, the former Assistant Secretary Treasury under the Reagan administration, former Wall Street Journal editor, and author of numerous books, including The Tyranny of Good Intentions and How the Economy Was Lost, and many, many other things in his biography besides. But Dr. Roberts, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, James. Pleased to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you here, and as we record this, we're just now days away from the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Obviously, a pivotal turning point in modern history, certainly for America, and I think for the world generally, and has really affected our lives in so many ways. And very recently, you put out a very powerful article entitled "9/11 After a Decade: Have We Learned Anything?" And it's really, I think, quite a tour de force of the breakdown in the ways in which the official government-sanctioned conspiracy theory of what happened on 9/11 is full of holes, lies, and misconceptions and cover-ups, and has been thoroughly debunked by numerous experts. So let's start with that article and what prompted you to write it, and tell us a little bit about some of the things contained therein.
Okay, James. First, let me make it clear that I've not made any original contributions to 9/11 research. I'm just a reporter. And I certainly don't know everything about it, but I have read widely among those who are skeptical. And what this recent article does is just sort of ask the question, how well has the government's explanation held up after 10 years? And I conclude it hasn't held up very well. We have, for example, the chairman and vice chairman and senior legal counsel of the 9/11 Commission itself, who have written books in which they partially disassociate themselves from their own 9/11 report. And they report that the commission was set up to fail, that the government made a decision not to tell the truth, that information was withheld from them, that witnesses who appeared before them were mainly people who agreed with the government's account, and that NORAD had lied to them, and that they had considered, or if not NORAD, I think they said Pentagon officials and FAA officials, I think that's what they said, had lied to them, and that they had actually considered referring that on obstruction of justice charges. Well, this is an amazing sort of outcome from the three senior people leading the commission, and so it raised questions. Now, to be clear, none of these three suggested that the government was complicit in the attack itself. And what they seem to be saying is that the government either needed to cover up its incompetence or to cover up that it actually knew more about the alleged attackers than it let on. They're not very specific about the nature of the lies, other than that they believe they were lied to. We also have the fact that one of the members of the commission, Max Cleland, the former U.S. Senator, had resigned from the commission on the grounds that the fix was in, that they weren't going to have full access to the information under the rules that the White House had established for the commission, and that the commission was already compromised. Well, this is enough to make you wonder what really was going on. And then in this decade that's passed, we've had a number of professional groups arise. We've had the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. There are now 1,500 of these architects and engineers who, based on the base of their own professionalism and expertise, say these buildings could not have fallen for the reasons given, that they had to have fallen for some other reasons. And we have physicists who have raised serious questions. And most recently, we had a report from an international scientific team led by, I think his name is Niels Harrit, a professor of nanochemistry at the University of Copenhagen, who reports finding nanothermite in the dust of the buildings. Well, when you look around at the response to these kinds of statements and findings, you don't see any. They're largely not reported in the American media. Professor Harrit has been on a tour of Canadian universities explaining the argument. But as far as I can tell, this wasn't even reported in the United States. And then we have firefighters for 9/11 Truth, pilots for 9/11 Truth, scholars for 9/11 Truth. And when you have over 100 firefighters, many of whom were actually in the buildings, and they report not only hearing numerous explosions, some in the sub-basements, but experiencing them personally, being thrown about by the explosions. And you have pilots, both commercial and military, who question the maneuvers. You would think that there would be some response to this, but there's not. There's just sort of a blanket, oh, these are conspiracy theorists. And so they don't believe the government's reports, so we don't have to pay attention to them. Well, the government's own report is a conspiracy theory. In fact, it seems to me to be an even less likely conspiracy theory, because it says that a handful of Arabs outwitted the CIA, the FBI, indeed all 16 American intelligence agencies, all intelligence agencies of America's allies, including Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. They outwitted the National Security Council, NORAD, air traffic control, and airport security 4 times in 1 hour on the same morning. Now, if something this improbable happened, from my own time in government, what you would have had the president, the Congress, the media demanding to know how there could be such massive failure, not just of intelligence, but operational failure, the inability to get up interceptor jets. So many failures. And yet, the Bush administration resisted any kind of inquiry for a year or perhaps 2. I can't remember. I remember the 9/11 families were demanding an inquiry. They wanted to know how could this happen. And finally, they put together simply a political commission. There were no experts on this commission. They were all former politicians who, generally speaking, are very tame people. They've been there a long time. Their human capital is tied up with their connections to Washington. They don't want to ruin those connections. So they're basically compliant. And yet we see 4 of the members of the commission were not, at least after the report came out. So when you look at all of this, it makes you wonder what really is going on when there's so much contrary evidence, not from kooks, but from professionals You can't say a professor of nanochemistry at the University of Copenhagen is a kook who would make up a story about nanothermite if he didn't find it. He certainly couldn't go out and buy any to add to the dust. You can't get it. It's a military grade thing. So you would think that there would be all kinds of uproar and what's going on, and then we have all these public statements from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that they didn't look for explosives.
In fact, they said they didn't look for explosives because there was no evidence that they would find any evidence for explosives. So if you can parse that circular logic, good luck.
So, it just looks bad. And yet, we don't know that the United States government blew up the buildings. If you look at the buildings, they're not falling down from structural damage. The structural damage was asymmetrical. So you would think that if you were going to have falling buildings from airplane damage, that the top part of the building above where the plane hit would fall over in the direction where the plane hit and took out supports. Nothing like this happened. It comes straight down. And if you watch it, it doesn't look like buildings falling down. It looks like buildings blowing up. And this is completely clear in the case of Building 7. This is a controlled demolition. And we have on tape the leaseholder, Larry Silverstein, saying that the decision was made to pull the building. Now, pulling a building means you have it wired for demolition and you make it fall. And we have the fact that a high school physics teacher forced NIST to abandon its explanation of that building and to acknowledge that for a period of its fall, it was in free fall. And the only way you can have a building falling in free fall is there must be no support underneath the area that's falling. So the only way you can have all support disappearing at the same time is with some form of explosive or some form of steel searing, melting explosive. So when you look at all of this, you come back to the question, why aren't there questions? Why is all of this simply ignored? I mean, there has been some effort to address some of the contrary evidence, but most of it is just ignored. And people say, well, look, if this was a government conspiracy, you couldn't keep it secret. But you most certainly can. We've had 100 firefighters in the building say they heard explosions. They experienced them, but it has no effect. So I think it's very easy to keep something secret. Most people, all they know about it is they saw on television the buildings, the two towers. Most people don't even know about the third building yet. They saw the two towers, and the government told them Al Qaeda did it, and that's the end of the story. To try to read technical stuff or scientific explanations, and most people don't have the education. They can't follow it, and they're content with the government's account. It is emotionally satisfying. The contrary account is very disturbing. And so we have this amazing situation, James, where the defining element of our time, this is the most important event of our time. It has caused the United States to be in perpetual war for over a decade. The war now has involved 6 Muslim countries. There doesn't appear to be any end of it. Syria seems to be about to be hit as well, and Iran is still there. It has brought us into confrontations with China and Russia. The destruction of the Gaddafi regime in Libya is It was designed to evict China from its oil investments in Libya. We have here at home the rise of a domestic police state.